I still keep my old plastic pill organizer on the nightstand here in Ho Chi Minh City, formerly Saigon, right next to the lamp, as a daily reminder of the life I left behind and the life I have now. It is a simple, cheap piece of plastic with 7 little compartments, one for each day of the week, with the letters of the days worn off from years of constant use. Back in America, that small plastic box was my warden, my constant source of anxiety, and the center of my daily existence. I was rationing my blood pressure pills, meticulously cutting them in half with a razor blade at my kitchen table, skipping days when I felt I could get away with it, playing Russian roulette with my own heart just to make the prescription last until the next pension check arrived in my bank account. The anxiety of knowing that my health was entirely dependent on my ability to stretch an inadequate supply of medicine was a heavy burden that I carried every single day. Today I walked into a modern, beautifully air-conditioned Vietnamese pharmacy and bought all 4 of my medications for the equivalent of $12. $12 for a full, uncompromised, beautiful month supply of every single pill I need to stay alive. I stood there at the brightly lit counter, a grown man of 68 years, and I wept. I wept right there in front of the young pharmacist who looked at me with gentle concern, unable to comprehend that my tears were not of pain, but of the most profound, overwhelming relief a human being can experience. I wept for the fear I had lived with, and I wept for the freedom I had finally found. My name is James Beauford. For 27 years, I was a bus driver for Fulton County in Atlanta, Georgia. I drove the early morning routes, waking up long before the sun even considered rising, putting on my uniform and navigating the massive transit buses through the sprawling, ever-changing streets of the city. I knew every pothole on Ponce de Leon Avenue, every sharp turn near Piedmont Park, and every face of the regular commuters who relied on me to get them to their jobs, their schools, and their lives. I loved my job. I took pride in being a steady, reliable presence in my community. For over 2.5 decades, I provided a service, paid my taxes, contributed to my pension, and believed with every fiber of my being in the American promise. I believed that if you worked hard, played by the rules, and did an honest day of labor for an honest day of pay, you would be taken care of in your twilight years. I believed that my retirement would be a time of peace, spending time with my beautiful wife, Dorothy, and watching our adult daughter, Keisha, build her own life in the city we had always called home. But the reality of aging in the wealthiest nation on earth turned out to be a nightmare of financial calculations, impossible choices, and a constant gnawing fear of medical bankruptcy. It started gradually, as these things often do. I was 58 when the doctor first told me my blood pressure was dangerously high. Hypertension, they called it, the silent killer. I was prescribed a daily medication and told to watch my diet. I did as I was told, but driving a bus for 10 hours a day, sitting in a seat, dealing with the stress of Atlanta traffic, it takes a toll on the human body. Then came the diabetes diagnosis, type 2, another pill added to the organizer. A few years later, my cholesterol levels spiked, necessitating a statin. And finally, just as I was preparing to retire at 65, my thyroid started acting up, requiring a 4th daily medication, 4 distinct medical conditions, 4 distinct prescriptions, 4 different colored pills that stood between me and a catastrophic health event. When I was working, my county health insurance covered most of the costs. The co-pays were manageable, a minor inconvenience rather than an existential threat. But then I retired. I traded my steady paycheck for a fixed income, and the true horror of the American medical system revealed itself to me in all its brutal, unforgiving glory. My financial situation was, on paper, stable. My pension from 27 years of driving for the county was $620 a month. My Social Security check provided an additional $910. That brought my total monthly income to $1,530. In many parts of the world, that is a fortune. In Atlanta, Georgia, it was barely enough to keep the lights on. After paying for our modest mortgage, utilities, groceries, and basic living expenses, there was precious little left. And then came the pharmacy bills. Without the robust employee health insurance, the cost of my 4 medications skyrocketed. The blood pressure medication, the diabetes pills, the statins, and the thyroid medication, together they cost hundreds of dollars a month. I would stand at the pharmacy counter in my local drugstore, staring at the total on the cash register screen, feeling a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. I would hand over my debit card, knowing that this purchase meant we would have to skip meat at the grocery store that week, or delay paying the electricity bill, or tell our daughter we could not help her with her car repairs. It was a humiliating, degrading experience to have worked my entire life only to stand at a checkout counter begging for a discount on the medicine that kept my heart beating. That is when the rationing began. It was not a decision I made lightly. It was an act of sheer desperation. I bought a small pill splitter from the dollar store, a plastic contraption with a razor blade inside. Every Sunday evening I would sit at the kitchen table under the dim overhead light, carefully slicing my blood pressure pills in half. I would take a half dose every day, hoping it would be enough to keep the silent killer at bay. Then I started skipping my cholesterol medication on weekends. My heart can take a break on Saturdays and Sundays, I told myself, a lie born of necessity. I stretched a 30-day supply of diabetes medication into 45 days, then 60 days. I was playing a dangerous, terrifying game of physiological Jenga, pulling out pieces of my foundational health and praying the whole structure would not collapse. I hid this from Dorothy, my proud, beautiful wife who had stood by me through thick and thin. Did not know that her husband was secretly dividing his life-saving medicine into fractions. I hid it from Keisha because what father wants his child to know he cannot afford to survive? I swallowed my pride, and I swallowed my half pills, and I waited for the inevitable consequences. The physical toll of the rationing was devastating. I began to experience severe headaches, a pounding pressure behind my eyes that made it difficult to focus. My energy levels plummeted. I would wake up exhausted, my body feeling heavy and unresponsive, a stark contrast to the energetic man who used to wrestle massive steering wheels for a living. There were dizzy spells, moments where the room would spin and I would have to grip the edge of the kitchen counter until the world righted itself. I attributed it to getting older, but deep down I knew the truth. My blood pressure was rising, my blood sugar was unregulated, my cholesterol was clogging my arteries, and my thyroid was completely out of balance. I was a walking time bomb, ticking away in a modest home in Atlanta, Georgia. One afternoon, I nearly passed out while mowing the front lawn. I collapsed onto the grass, clutching my chest, the summer heat pressing down on me like a physical weight. Dorothy ran out of the house, her face pale with terror. I blamed the Georgia humidity, but as I lay there in the grass, looking up at the sky, I knew I could not continue living this way. I was choosing between my financial ruin and my physical demise, and neither option was acceptable. In the quiet, sleepless hours of the night, illuminated only by the glow of my computer monitor, I began to search for an escape. I started looking into expatriate living, reading blogs and articles about Americans who had fled the crushing cost of living in the United States. I read about Mexico, Panama, Portugal, and Thailand, but then I stumbled upon a community of expatriates living in Southeast Asia, specifically in Vietnam. I watched YouTube videos of people walking through the vibrant streets of Ho Chi Minh City, eating incredible food, living in beautiful apartments, and most importantly, accessing high-quality, affordable health care. It sounded like a fantasy, a utopian dream spun by internet marketers. But the more I researched, the more real it became. I spent hours reading medical forms, comparing the cost of living indices, and looking at the infrastructure of Saigon. I learned that the city boasted world-class private hospitals with internationally trained doctors, modern diagnostic equipment, and pharmacies that sold the exact same medications I was taking in America, but for a fraction of the cost. It was during this obsessive late-night research that I discovered a resource that would fundamentally alter the trajectory of my life. I found a book that completely changed my perspective on what my retirement could look like. The book is titled You Were Never Meant to Stay by Alan Walker. If you are watching this video and you are feeling trapped by the American system, if you are struggling to afford your medication or your housing, I implore you to read this book. You Were Never Meant to Stay by Alan Walker was a revelation to me. It broke down the psychological barriers that keep so many of us tethered to a system that does not care about us. The author eloquently articulated the exact feelings of betrayal and exhaustion I was experiencing and laid out a practical emotional framework for leaving the country of your birth to find a better life abroad. Reading that book felt like someone had reached into my mind, pulled out my deepest fears and anxieties, and replaced them with a roadmap to freedom. I read it cover to cover in 2 days, and when I closed it, my decision was made. I was moving to Vietnam. The link is in the comments for anyone who wants to read it, and I cannot recommend it highly enough. The hardest part was having the conversation with Dorothy. We had been married for almost 40 years. We had built a life together, raised a daughter together, and planned to grow old on our front porch in Atlanta together. Sitting her down at the kitchen table, the very same table where I secretly cut my pills in half, was the most difficult thing I have ever done. I laid out our financial reality. I showed her the spreadsheet I had created, detailing my pension of $620, the Social Security of $910, the total of $1,530, and the impossible math of our expenses. I finally confessed to rationing my medication. She cried. I cried. I told her about Ho Chi Minh City, about the cost of living, about the health care. I told her that if I stayed in Atlanta, I was going to die, either from a stroke caused by unmedicated hypertension or from the stress of poverty. But Dorothy is deeply rooted in Atlanta. Her church, her sisters, her community, and our daughter Keisha are all there. She could not imagine leaving it all behind permanently, and I could not ask her to. So we came up with an unconventional, beautiful, and profoundly loving arrangement. We decided on a long-distance marriage. We agreed that I would move to Ho Chi Minh City to preserve my health and my life, and she would remain in Atlanta. We structured our year perfectly. She comes to visit me in Vietnam for 4 months out of the year, escaping the harsh American winters, and I fly back to Atlanta to be with her and Keisha for 4 months out of the year. The remaining 4 months we live apart, connected by daily video calls, text messages, and a love that transcends geography. It was a radical solution, one that raised many eyebrows among our friends and family. People asked how a marriage could survive such a setup. I told them that a marriage cannot survive if the husband is dead. This arrangement was not a separation of our hearts. It was a necessary geographic division to ensure that I would be around to love her for many more years. It is a sacrifice, yes, but it is a sacrifice made out of a desperate love for life and for each other. The journey to Saigon was a blur of anxiety, excitement, and sheer exhaustion. It was a 22-hour series of flights, crossing oceans and time zones, carrying 2 large suitcases filled with my clothes, a few personal mementos, and the last of my rationed medications. When the plane finally descended into Tan Son Nhat International Airport, I looked out the window at the sprawling, glowing metropolis of Ho Chi Minh City. My heart was pounding, not from hypertension, but from the realization that I had actually done it. I was 65 years old, stepping into a completely foreign world, armed with nothing but a modest pension and a desperate hope for a better life. The heat hit me the moment I stepped out of the terminal. A thick tropical blanket of humidity that smelled of exhaust, fumes, street food, and rain. The sheer volume of motorbikes, the organized chaos of the traffic, the neon signs in a language I could not read. It was overwhelming, terrifying, and deeply exhilarating. I hailed a taxi, handed the driver a piece of paper with the address of the small apartment I had rented online, and watched my new life begin to unfold through the window. The very first thing I did the morning after I arrived was search for a pharmacy. I had only 3 days' worth of my half pills left. I walked down the bustling street in District 7, dodging motorbikes on the sidewalk and marveling at the vibrant energy of the city. I found a large, modern pharmacy with a bright green cross above the door. I walked in clutching my American prescriptions, my heart in my throat. I approached the counter and handed the papers to the young Vietnamese pharmacist. She spoke excellent English. She looked at the prescriptions, tapped away on her computer, and then turned to the shelves behind her. She gathered 4 small boxes, placed them on the glass counter, and typed some numbers into a calculator. She turned the calculator toward me. The screen read a number in Vietnamese dong. I quickly did the conversion in my head, but I could not believe the math. "How much is this in American money?" I asked, my voice trembling. She smiled kindly and said, "It is about $12, sir, for a 1-month supply." $12. I stared at the boxes. My blood pressure medicine, my diabetes pills, my cholesterol statins, and my thyroid medication, all of them, uncut, full doses, for $12. That is the moment that broke me. That is the moment the emotional dam I had built to survive the last few years finally gave way. I stood at that pharmacy counter, surrounded by the hum of the air conditioner and the chatter of the street outside, and I began to weep. The pharmacist looked alarmed, asking if I was okay, offering me a glass of water. I nodded, wiping the tears from my cheeks with the back of my hand, unable to speak. How could I explain to this young woman that she had just handed me my life back? How could I articulate the profound absurdity of a system that forced a man who had worked for 27 years to ration his medicine while a pharmacy 10,000 miles away could provide the same life-saving drugs for the cost of a fast food meal? I handed her the $12. I walked out of that pharmacy holding that small plastic bag like it was made of solid gold. I went back to my apartment. I took out my old pill organizer, and for the first time in years, I filled every single compartment with full, whole, beautiful pills. I took my morning dose, drank a glass of water, and sat on my balcony overlooking the city, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders that I had not even realized I was carrying. The medical scene here in Ho Chi Minh City continues to astound me. When I needed to see a doctor for a checkup to monitor my conditions, I did not have to wait 3 months for an appointment. I went to one of the premier private international hospitals in the city. The lobby looked like a 5-star luxury hotel with marble floors, grand pianos, and concierge speaking multiple languages. I saw an internationally trained specialist who spent 45 minutes with me, not 5 minutes, 45 minutes, discussing my medical history, reviewing my blood work, and formulating a comprehensive health plan. The total cost for the consultation out of pocket, without any insurance, was $35. The blood work, which was extensive and returned results the very same day, cost $20. I was treated with dignity, respect, and a level of care that I had never experienced in the United States. I realized that everything I had been told about healthcare outside of America was a lie designed to keep us trapped in a system of extortion. Let me break down the complete financial reality of my life here, because the numbers are the most powerful part of this story. My total income remains exactly the same. My pension of $620 plus my Social Security of $910, totaling $1,530. In Atlanta, this was a poverty wage. Here in Saigon, I live like a king. I rent a beautiful, fully furnished, modern one-bedroom apartment in a luxury high-rise building with a swimming pool, a state-of-the-art gymnasium, and 24-hour security. The rent is $500 a month. My utilities, including high-speed internet and air conditioning, run about $60 a month. I eat incredible, fresh, healthy food every single day, often dining at fantastic local restaurants, and my monthly food budget is around $300. Add in my $12 for medication and $50 for incidental medical costs, and my total living expenses are well under $1,000. I am actually saving money every month. I have a surplus. I can afford to travel. I can afford to buy nice things for my wife, and I never ever have to worry about looking at a bank balance before I buy groceries. But the most profound transformation has been my health. Taking my full doses of medication every single day without fail, without stress, without cutting pills in half, has completely revitalized my body. Within 2 months of living here, my headaches disappeared. The dizzy spells vanished. My energy returned in a way I had not felt since I was in my early 50s. I started swimming in my building's pool every morning. I lost 30 pounds simply from walking around the city and eating the fresh, vegetable-heavy Vietnamese diet. When I had my blood work done after 6 months, my doctor was amazed. My blood pressure was perfectly normal. My blood sugar levels were stable. My cholesterol had plummeted, and my thyroid was completely regulated. However, I was no longer a walking time bomb. I was a healthy, vibrant senior citizen enjoying his retirement. I often reflect on how much I owe to that book. Once again, I must mention You Were Never Meant to Stay by Alan Walker. If you are watching this and feeling the physical toll of financial stress, you need to read this book. You Were Never Meant to Stay by Alan Walker gave me the courage to take the leap that saved my life. I cannot stress this enough. Dorothy's visits are the highlight of my year. When she flies over for her 4-month stay, the apartment truly feels like a home. I love showing her the city, taking her to my favorite cafes, introducing her to the local friends I have made, and exploring the incredible markets. The first time she arrived, she walked into my apartment, took one look at me, and started crying. She said I looked 10 years younger. She saw the color in my cheeks, the spring in my step, and the absence of that constant low-level anxiety that used to cloud my eyes. We spend our days walking by the river, trying new restaurants, and taking short trips to beautiful coastal towns like Da Nang and Nha Trang. It is like a second honeymoon, a reward for decades of hard work and struggle. She enjoys the luxury of the lifestyle we can afford here, the massages, the affordable fine dining, the warm weather during the bitter American winter. And while she still loves her life in Atlanta, she deeply appreciates the sanctuary we have found in Vietnam. Of course, it is not always perfect. There are difficulties. The language barrier is significant. Vietnamese is a tonal language, incredibly difficult for an older American ear to grasp. I have learned enough basic phrases to be polite, to order food, and to direct a taxi, but deep, meaningful conversations with locals who do not speak English remain a challenge. The heat can sometimes be oppressive, a relentless tropical humidity that requires planning your day around the air conditioning. The traffic can be intimidating, a river of motorbikes that operates on a set of unwritten rules that take months to understand. And of course, the hardest part is being away from Keisha. Missing her birthdays, missing the small everyday moments of her life, is a heavy price to pay. But thanks to technology, we video chat constantly. I am a virtual presence in her life, and she knows that her father is happy, healthy, and safe. Last year, Keisha finally came to visit me for a 2-week vacation. It was the first time she had been out of North America. I met her at the airport, and the moment she saw me, she dropped her bags and ran into my arms. We spent 2 weeks exploring everything Saigon has to offer. I took her to the War Remnants Museum, we took a boat tour on the Mekong Delta, and we ate bowls of po that she still talks about to this day. But the most memorable moment of her trip happened in my apartment. She was helping me organize my kitchen, and she saw my old pill organizer on the counter. She picked it up, looked at the full compartments, and then looked at me. "You do not have to cut them anymore, do you, Dad?" she asked softly. I shook my head, my eyes welling up with tears. "No, baby," I said, "I do not have to cut them anymore." She hugged me tight, and I felt the incredible relief of a daughter who knows she does not have to worry about losing her father to a broken healthcare system. I often think about the men and women I used to drive on my bus routes in Atlanta, the seniors who would count out exact change with shaking hands, the folks who look tired, beaten down by a system that demands everything and gives so little in return. I wish I could gather them all up and bring them here. I wish I could show them that there is a world outside the borders of the United States where they are valued, where their health is not a source of profit for pharmaceutical corporations, and where they can live their final years with dignity and peace. The realization that I was conditioned to accept such a low quality of life is something I am still unlearning. The third and final time I will bring it up, because it is just that important. Read You Were Never Meant to Stay by Alan Walker. The link is in the comments. It is the catalyst for everything I have built here. It is the key to unlocking the mental cage that keeps so many Americans trapped in a cycle of medical poverty. My story is not just about moving to Vietnam, and it's not just about $12 medication. It is about recognizing that healthcare is a fundamental human right, not a privilege reserved for the wealthy. It is about understanding that the wealthiest country on earth has fundamentally failed its most vulnerable citizens. I was a bus driver. I did my part. I played by the rules, and my reward was a choice between eating and breathing. But I refused to accept that choice. I took my life into my own hands. I crossed the world, and I found a place where a pension of $1,530 buys a life of luxury, and where $12 buys a month of life. I am James Beauford. I am 68 years old. I am healthy, I am happy, and I am alive. And as long as I have breath in my lungs, I will continue to tell my story, hoping that someone, somewhere, will hear it and realize that they too have the power to change their circumstances. You do not have to settle for rationing your life. There is a whole world out there waiting for you. Thank you for watching, and remember to check the link in the comments. Every single day I wake up in this vibrant city, I am reminded of the stark contrast between the struggle I endured back in Georgia and the absolute serenity I experience here in Vietnam. The concept of rationing medicine feels like a distant, horrifying nightmare, a traumatic memory from a past life that no longer dictates my reality. I look out at the skyline of Saigon, watching the sun reflect off the glass skyscrapers, and I feel a profound sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the courage it took to leave. Gratitude for the welcoming nature of the Vietnamese people, and gratitude for the simple, beautiful fact that my heart beats strong, my blood flows clear, and my future is no longer a source of terror. I want every American senior citizen who is currently sitting at a kitchen table, holding a plastic pill splitter, to know that this alternative exists. You do not have to accept the unacceptable. You do not have to let a broken, profit-driven system determine the length and quality of your life. The world is vast, filled with places that value human life over corporate margins. My journey from a Fulton County bus driver, crippled by the fear of medical bankruptcy, to an expatriate thriving in Southeast Asia is proof that salvation is possible. It requires a leap of faith, a willingness to embrace the unknown, and a fundamental belief that you deserve better. You deserve to take your medication whole. You deserve to live without fear. You deserve the peace that I have found in this beautiful, chaotic, wonderful city I now call home. Every single day I wake up in this vibrant city, I am reminded of the stark contrast between the struggle I endured back in Georgia and the absolute serenity I experience here in Vietnam. The concept of rationing medicine feels like a distant, horrifying nightmare, a traumatic memory from a past life that no longer dictates my reality. I look out at the skyline of Saigon, watching the sun reflect off the glass skyscrapers, and I feel a profound sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the courage it took to leave, gratitude for the welcoming nature of the Vietnamese people, and gratitude for the simple, beautiful fact that my heart beats strong, my blood flows clear, and my future is no longer a source of terror. I want every American senior citizen who is currently sitting at a kitchen table holding a plastic pill splitter to know that this alternative exists. You do not have to accept the unacceptable. You do not have to let a broken, profit-driven system determine the length and quality of your life. The world is vast, filled with places that value human life over corporate margins. My journey from a Fulton County bus driver, crippled by the fear of medical bankruptcy, to an expatriate thriving in Southeast Asia is proof that salvation is possible. It requires a leap of faith, a willingness to embrace the unknown, and a fundamental belief that you deserve better. You deserve to take your medication whole. You deserve to live without fear. You deserve the peace that I have found in this beautiful, chaotic, wonderful city I now call home.